Hey guys, I hope you're ready for day 2. I hope you enjoyed the story yesterday. Today's story is Rabbit Stew, and it's about a dog and some clever rabbits. And we're going to see what kind of trouble this dog gets into. And it is definitely one of my favorites to read to kids. So I hope you enjoy Rabbit Stew as much as I do. Once a while back, in a rickety old shack, there lived a dog. He wasn't very smart and he didn't have much money, but he was happy. The dog had a garden laid out in neat rows, nestled in a sunny meadow. In the spring, the dog planted seeds in his garden, and in the summer, he cared for the plants and watched them grow. And then he would pick and eat the vegetables he'd grown. The dog just loved his garden. But he had one big problem. Hungry rabbits would sneak into his garden and nibble on his vegetables. They made holes in his cabbage leaves. They dug up his carrots and his potatoes, and they chewed on his parsley. The dog tried chasing the rabbits away, but they always came back. Then one day, the dog looked out his window and he saw those darn rabbits eating all his tender new lettuce plants. That was the last straw. The dog ran into the garden and chased the rabbits around and around until he caught them at last with a leap and a pounce. Thought the dog. Now what should I do with those pesky rabbits? Maybe I'll make rabbit stew. Yes, that's what I think I'll do. And so their dog took the rabbits inside and put them in a large cooking pot. Then he opened his cookbook, but he couldn't find a recipe for rabbit stew, and he didn't know what to do. One clever rabbit suggested, "You could go out to the garden and get some carrots to put in the stew." Good idea, thought the dog. So he said to the little rabbits, "You wait right here while I go out to the garden to get some carrots." And the little rabbits nodded their heads and said, oh yes, we'll try our best." Do you think they're going to stay in the pot? But as soon as the dog went out into the garden, the rabbits leaped from the pot and scampered happily out the door. And when the dog returned, he saw that all the rabbits were gone. He dropped the carrots into the pot, feeling a little disappointed. Well, the next day, when the dog looked out his window, the rabbits were now nibbling on his onions. And so the dog chased them around and around until he caught them at last with a leap and a pounce. And then he took those rabbits back inside and put them back into the large cooking pot. "Now," said the dog, "I have rabbits and carrots to make rabbit stew." But then one little rabbit said, "But you must have celery for rabbit stew." "Are you sure?" said the dog. "I'll go out to the garden and get some celery, but this time you have to remember to stay in the pot, okay?" And the little rabbits shook their heads and said, oh yes, we'll try our best." But as soon as the dog went out to the garden, all the rabbits scampered happily out the door. When the dog came back, he saw that the rabbits were gone again. As he put the celery in the pot, he thought to himself, those rabbits aren't very smart. They forgot to stay in the pot again. And so the next day, the hungry rabbits sneaked back into the garden again, so the dog chased them around and around until he caught them again with a leap and a pounce. And then he put those rabbits back in the large cooking pot. I have rabbits and carrots and celery, said the dog. Now I can make some rabbit stew. But you must have potatoes and onions to make rabbit stew, said one clever rabbit. Yes, I know, said the dog, trying to look smart. But if I go out to the garden, you rabbits will forget to stay in the pot. After thinking a bit, one rabbit said, You could shut the door. Then we couldn't run out that way. Good idea, thought the dog. And then he said to the rabbits, Now you stay in the pot while I go dig up some potatoes and onions. And the rabbits shook their heads and said, oh yes, we'll try our best. And out to the garden the dog went, closing the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, those pesky rabbits leaped to the window and jumped away. And then away they ran, glad they had fooled the dog once again. When the dog came back, he saw that the rabbits were gone, and he put the potatoes and onions into the pot. And to his surprise, the pot was full to the top with vegetables. There was no room for rabbits. Well, it's just as well the rabbits are gone, said the dog, because they wouldn't fit in the pot anyway. I'll just make rabbit stew without the rabbits. And then he felt very proud of himself for having such a good idea. Happily, the dog poured some water into the pot, turned on the stove, and cooked his rabbit stew. It smelled delicious. For supper, he ate 3 big bowls of stew, and then when he couldn't eat another bite, the dog put some of the leftover stew outside for the rabbits. After all, he said, those rabbits might not be very smart, but they sure know how to make a good rabbit stew. Hope you enjoyed today's story. It is one of my favorites. Those crazy little rabbits tricked that dog for sure. See you tomorrow. Bye.